Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Welcome to Crossing the River, a podcast that amplifies the voices of Indigenous leaders from around the world. In each episode, they share their wisdom, experiences, and urgent advice for a world in crisis. Before we begin, know that Crossing the River takes a deliberate and distinctive approach to translation. You will hear the voices of Indigenous leaders directly. This is an invitation to listen deeply, to feel their message in their own words, and to pay attention to meaning beyond language, embracing the power behind their voices. This is an invitation to cross the river. Crossing the River is produced by the More Than Human Life Moth Project, based at the Center for Human Rights and Global Justice at NYU School of Law and 070 Podcast. It is September 2024. We are in the Ecuadorian Amazon, in the territory of the Sarayaku indigenous people. We have already heard from some of their leaders in Crossing the River. We are with someone who, like us, has traveled here.
Mutruma Patricia Tobón-Yagarí, mu Emberahuera, Colombia de Bena. Mi nombre es Patricia Tobón-Yagarí. Yo soy indígena del pueblo Emberá de Colombia.
Patricia Tobón-Yagarí is an indigenous leader from the Emberá peoples in Colombia. Patricia was invited to Sarayaku to share her experience in the fight for indigenous rights in Colombia. She is one of the first indigenous lawyers from her people, and in the entire country, a lawyer who mediates between two worlds, that of the Emberá people and that of the society on the other side of the river, a lawyer who has taken indigenous representation to the highest spheres of power. It is 5:30 p.m. and the sun is setting. We are sitting on the edges of a wooden house with a roof made of leaves and branches, with no walls, open to the air. As darkness sets in, insects draw near, their buzzing growing louder, while birds sing as if welcoming the night.
Y como nací en el seno de una familia de líderes, o sea, de una mujer y de un hombre que vienen de fundar y ayudar a fundar el movimiento indígena colombiano que hoy conocemos, con cabildos, con capacidad pues de resolver problemas, con la agenda, muchas historias.
Patricia has a contagious smile with almond-shaped black eyes, like her short hair that frames her face. She describes growing up in a family of leaders who played a key role in founding and shaping the indigenous movement in Colombia.
Yo nací hermana del movimiento indígena, o sea, y entonces estuve en muchos congresos siendo bebé, gaté en los congresos, y como ya a los 5 años jugaba a escribir, ya a los 9 años hacía actas.
Patricia says, I was born a sister of the indigenous movement. She grew up in it. And when she was 5 years old, she would pretend to write the minutes of the meetings, something she started actually doing when she turned 9. A photo remains from that Congress. 19 indigenous men, and at the center, a woman. She has her arms crossed, short hair, and she stares directly at the camera. She is Eulalia Yagarí, an indigenous leader and one of the founders of the Colombian indigenous movement. To Eulalia's right, sitting on a men's lap, is her daughter, baby Patricia.
Nos pareció como importante poner la foto de un naciente para decir que venía un futuro cargado de promesa y de esperanza.
When she saw the photo, someone told her, including a baby symbolized a future full of promise and hope. And so, she believes her destiny was already set from a young age.
Entonces, pues desde muy joven, digamos que mi destino ya estaba trazado.
Patricia, now 45 years old, grew up in the Emberá Chamí community, within the ancestral territory of Carmata Rua in the Andes Mountains. The Emberá are the third largest indigenous group in Colombia and also live in what is now Panama and northern Ecuador. Patricia says she was born as a sister to the indigenous movement because her father, Alonso Tobón, and her mother, Eulalia Yagarí, an Emberá Chamí indigenous leader, met during the creation of indigenous councils, which structure the local representation systems for each indigenous peoples in Colombia.
Mi primera escuela era mi casa, porque por mi casa pasaron grandes dirigentes y líderes indígenas del país. En mi casa se daban discusiones de todo tipo, de toda la historia del movimiento indígena en muchos momentos.
Her home was her first school, as many important indigenous leaders passed through it. She grew up listening to discussions about history and the indigenous movement and speaking two varieties of Emberá and Spanish, living between her indigenous reservation and Medellín, Colombia's second largest city.
El nacer en dos mundos te permite como entender que hay pues como concepciones culturales con las cuales convive la gente y vive en esos mundos. Entonces yo vivía una realidad en las comunidades de donde yo era y otra realidad a la media hora cuando salía al pueblo donde estaba pues la colonización.
Patricia grew up between two realities, that of her indigenous reservation and that of the city. She believes this gave her a unique insight into how cultural perspectives can coexist. From a young age, she began to notice that lawyers played a crucial role in defending indigenous rights. In fact, the first officially recognized indigenous lawyer in Colombia, Luis Aníbal Tascón, was from Patricia's same reservation. He was assassinated in 1981. At that time, lawyers who reached her community were rare, since they could not afford them, despite their critical role in defending their rights.
La comunidad no tenía con qué pagarlos y eran unos abogados especialistas que se requerían en la defensa de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, y de eso había muy poquito, pero escaso. Y la comunidad los esperaba meses, y cuando ellos llegaban, pues eran unas personas muy especiales para mi comunidad porque pues del trabajo que ellos iban a hacer dependía la defensa por los derechos de las comunidades.
When lawyers finally arrived after months of waiting, they were treated like honored guests. Many of those visiting lawyers stayed at her house. Patricia remembers that by listening to them, she began to understand why defending her people through legal means was necessary, and that's how she decided she would become a lawyer. Because that was what her community needed the most.
Y para mí me quedó muy claro en ese momento que yo tenía que ser abogada cuando creciera, porque eso era lo que más necesitaba mi comunidad.
Patricia explains that her people have been living in the Carmata Rua reservation where she grew up for nearly 200 years. The name Carmata Rua means land of pringamosa, or stinging nettle, a plant that stings but has healing properties. The Emberá were a nomadic people for centuries, until missionaries arrived around 1800, settling in what is now the Antioquia region. The church established boarding schools where indigenous children were taken to be evangelized.
La iglesia creara unos internados en unos puntos donde veían indígenas y los sometieran a procesos de evangelización.
As a result, many Emberá learned Spanish. Some worked on coffee plantations and eventually bought land, until settlers attempted to displace them. However, some Emberá families negotiated with the encomendero, the land distributor, to retain a small portion of land.
Cuando llegaron los repartidores de la colonización de las tierras, ¿cierto? Iban corriendo a los Emberá, los iban corriendo, y unas familias Emberá lograron que que quien repartía en ese momento, el encomendero les reconociera un pedazo donde podían quedarse. Y ahí se asentó la misión.
These Emberá families managed to keep the lands they had acquired. Thus, in 1854, one of the oldest indigenous reservations in Antioquia was established, called Carmatarrúa in Emberá and Cristianía in Spanish. However, the reservation was not officially recognized as indigenous territory by the Colombian state. Because of this, it was repeatedly invaded by coffee growers looking to expand their plantations in one of the world's leading coffee exporting countries. This continued until the 1970s, when representatives of the National Association of Peasant Users, ANUC, the largest and most representative peasant organization in Colombia, arrived in the community.
Ellos sabían que ellos hablaban otro idioma, sabían que ellos eran de un pueblo étnico, pero ellos no sabían que ellos eran, que eran indígenas, como con ese nombre. Y llegó ese grupo a explicarles que ellos, por tener un idioma distinto al de la colonización, todos tenían unos derechos. Y que ellos también tenían que exigir la titulación de sus tierras y había que mirar la situación de ellos.
Patricia explains how back then, the community knew they spoke a different language and belonged to an ethnic group, but they didn't necessarily identify as indigenous. The ANUC representatives explained that because they had a distinct language and culture, they had specific rights, including the right to demand legal recognition of their land. During this process, they discovered documents proving that these lands had previously been recognized and even purchased by Emberá families, official evidence that the territory belonged to them.
Con ese proceso empezó toda una exigencia en ese momento al Estado colombiano de que se le devolvieran esas tierras que ya tenían unos títulos para ese tema y que se resguardara la comunidad de Cristianía.
With this evidence, the community formally demanded that the Colombian state return their lands. After nearly 2 decades of struggle, Carmatarrúa was officially recognized as an indigenous reservation in 1995.
Si iban a titular las tierras en el país a la colonización, pues empezar por reconocer a los que históricamente han estado en esas tierras, como es el caso de los pueblos indígenas.
Patricia says that land titling should begin with those who have historically inhabited the land, indigenous peoples. This recognition set a precedent for indigenous communities fighting for land rights across Colombia. For Patricia, this struggle can't be separated from her story. Carmatarrúa is where she grew up, and the indigenous movement has shaped her life. That indigenous movement, which was formalized in 1981, captured in that photo we talked about earlier. And in that photo, the woman staring directly at the camera was Eulalia Yagarí, Patricia's mother. Eulalia was one of the founders of the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia, ONIC. She was the one who educated indigenous leaders so that they could organize and learn about their rights. And Patricia, just like in that photo, was always there. Her mother carried her everywhere.
Ella cargaba conmigo todo el tiempo. Mucha gente me veía ya grande y decía, ¿cómo está de grande?
And of course, Patricia recalls some of the most significant milestones of the indigenous movement during her childhood, such as the approval of the 1991 Constitution. This new constitution expanded indigenous rights and recognized the country as multicultural. When this happened, she was 10 years old.
Patricia, venga para acá, hija. Vamos a tomarnos un vino, una copa de vino. Yo tenía 10 años, le dije, mamá, pero si yo tengo 10 años, me dijo, no. Venga, que usted y yo vamos a recordar, este es un día muy importante para los pueblos indígenas.
Her mother invited her to share a glass of wine to celebrate this historic moment for indigenous peoples.
Entonces, esta constitución por la que hemos luchado tanto, estos derechos son unos derechos por los que vienen luchando históricamente los pueblos indígenas de Colombia y del mundo. Y entonces nos vamos a tomar este vino porque pudimos vivir este momento histórico y porque a su generación le tiene que tocar un futuro muy distinto del que le tocó a mi generación.
Her mother told her, "We are drinking this wine because we were able to live this historic moment. The moment we've been fighting for, and your generation should have a very different, brighter future." A year later, Eulalia broke another barrier.
Mi mamá fue la primera mujer indígena diputada en Colombia. Yo me acuerdo que ella llegó a la asamblea con todas las autoridades.
Her mother became the first indigenous woman to be elected as deputy of the Assembly of Antioquia. For the first time, an indigenous woman represented the interests of indigenous peoples in one of the most conservative states of Colombia.
Lo primero que hizo mi mamá, cuando le dieron el micrófono para hablar delante de todos esos hombres blancos, pues que históricamente habían tenido el poder en la gobernación de Antioquia, no fue hablar, fue cantar en su lengua materna, lo que ella canta. Ella cantó y siempre cantaba antes de hablar.
And the first thing she did when handed the microphone wasn't speak. She sang. She sang in her mother tongue.
Ibisusa kerame, nepuno rohaba, baito toi home ame, ubisianu mutema. Puchichu buri buru benana, puchichu buri buru benana. María Tomasa, tu por tu barria, susuhira.
Patricia sings a song her mother, Eulalia, loves. Picture this. In a building in downtown Medellin, in front of men in suits, on her first day as deputy, Eulalia sang. In a space where indigenous voices had long been absent, she made Embera language heard. 2 decades later, Patricia followed in her mother's footsteps. Colombia was negotiating peace with the FARC guerrilla, aiming to end over 50 years of armed conflict. That's when Patricia got the call.
Me pidieran que fuera a hacer el proceso del capítulo ETNI por parte del movimiento indígena.
She was asked to represent indigenous and Afro-Colombian peoples in the negotiations, communities deeply affected by the war, yet initially excluded from the talks. She hesitated, but Luis Fernando Arias, ONIC's senior advisor, insisted.
Me dijo, no, porque usted tiene esa capacidad de, digamos, de traspasar los mundos.
If you don't go, the process might not succeed. He told her, you have the power to bridge worlds. The ability to cross worlds. The ability to bring and dignify indigenous knowledge. To place it at the center of power so it is heard and considered. That skill proved crucial. The ethnic chapter of the peace agreement was signed at the last minute after intense advocacy from indigenous and Afro-Colombian leaders, U.S. officials, and allies. This chapter ensured the agreement recognized their rights and ancestral traditions, such as their condition as victims, the right to free, prior, and informed consultation, and autonomy over decisions and territories. As part of the peace agreement, the Comisión de la Verdad, the Truth Commission, was created to investigate Colombia's armed conflict. Patricia Tobón was appointed the only indigenous commissioner.
Yo sabía todas las discusiones que iba a enfrentar, todo lo que iba a pasar y todo lo que iba a vivir ahí, porque yo ya lo había vivido ya en cómo la sociedad nacional se ha portado con los pueblos indígenas.
Patricia says, I knew all the challenges I would face because I had already gone through it, knowing how Colombian society has treated indigenous peoples. As a truth commissioner, her role was to investigate thousands of stories of violence and navigate discussions with other commissioners about the truth of the armed conflict in the country. Patricia made it a priority to bring indigenous knowledge and their working methodologies to the Truth Commission.
Algo muy importante que dijeron los pueblos indígenas, y es que uno no puede construir una reconciliación nacional sin hacer una sanación.
An important point raised by indigenous peoples was that reconciliation cannot be achieved without healing.
La sanación es la posibilidad de encontrarnos y poder hablar de lo que nos pasó, no desde la acusación, sino desde la comprensión humana, y de poder liberarnos y poder contar por qué todos terminamos en esa situación.
Healing is the possibility of coming together to talk about what happened, not from a place of accusation, but from human understanding, in order to liberate ourselves and share why we ended up in that situation. While the Commission was collecting testimonies from victims and perpetrators and trying to reconstruct the truth of the conflict, Patricia listened to the indigenous peoples and implemented their proposal to establish healing dialogues. The most powerful example of this approach was the dialogue facilitated by the Truth Commission between Salvatore Mancuso, one of the most recognized paramilitaries in Colombia, and the family of Emberá indigenous leader Kimi Pernía Domicó in 2020. Kimi was murdered in 2002 on Mancuso's orders for defending his community and opposing the construction of the Urrá hydroelectric dam.
Nosotros mandamos una carta colectiva firmada por la comunidad a Salvatore Mancuso, haciéndole unas preguntas y diciéndole si él podría participar en un proceso de diálogo con la comunidad desde ese enfoque, y él aceptó.
Patricia says that they sent a collective letter signed by the community to Salvatore Mancuso, asking him questions and inviting him to participate in a dialogue with the community based on a healing approach. Mancuso agreed.
Yo, la verdad, lo lamento de todo corazón, y le pido perdón nuevamente por estos hechos tan dolorosos y lamentables.
Y eso es lo que yo quería saber, ahora tener un descanso que sé que tú estás ahora en este río.
In this dialogue, Mancuso acknowledged the murder of the leader and apologized to his daughter Marta Domicó and the community. Hearing directly from him what had been done to Kimi and the whereabouts of his remains was an act of reparation for the Emberá people.
Y eso nos permitió abordar desde el lado humano, primero conocer la historia de vida de él, su historia familiar, y entender por qué él termina en esa situación, y al mismo tiempo la familia Kimi Pernía, escuchar la hija y llegar a ese diálogo.
Patricia explains that this allowed them to see the human story behind violence and engage in a dialogue that resonated nationwide. Patricia believes healing requires the same commitment as war.
Nosotros tenemos muchas heridas, y desde esas heridas nos relacionamos como colombianos frente a los otros. Y si no hacemos un proceso de catarsis, de sanación, nosotros no vamos a poder construir el sueño de la reconciliación. No es posible que uno sienta empatía por otros si uno no lo ha escuchado.
The deep wounds caused by the armed conflict shaped the relationship between Colombians. Without a process of catharsis and healing, reconciliation cannot be achieved. Empathy cannot exist unless people have listened to each other. That is why the indigenous peoples called for these dialogues, to commit with the same intensity to healing as was present in the violence.
Así como nosotros nos hemos sumido en la violencia y llevamos muchos años en esa violencia, la gran conclusión también y el gran llamado que los pueblos indígenas hacían en la participación es que requerimos sumirnos en la sanación.
A After serving as a commissioner, Patricia was appointed by President Gustavo Petro's government as the director of the Unit for Victims, the agency responsible for compensating victims of the Colombian armed conflict. Throughout her life, this indigenous lawyer has bridged those two worlds, acting as a translator and conciliator in her work, a role that remains as necessary for indigenous peoples today as it was when she was a child.
En el mundo indígena nosotros somos muchos, pero tenemos una situación, muchos de nuestros pueblos están en sus mundos culturales y muy pocos de nosotros con la capacidad de, digamos, de defender y de ayudar a hacer un tránsito a nuestros pueblos frente a las violencias que están padeciendo.
Patricia says that although there are many indigenous peoples, few have the ability to defend and help their communities navigate the violence they face, and this is why they need individuals who can bridge the gap between worlds. This is something that Patricia recognized in herself from a young age, her capacity for conciliation. She realized it before becoming a commissioner of the truth, before leading healing dialogues, and even before heading the inter-ethnic chapter in the peace agreement. She always knew she wanted to be a lawyer because it was what her community needed.
Como yo nací y crecí en este movimiento indígena, era ser abogada de la UNIC, ese era mi sueño más grande. Y yo estaba muy feliz, pues, trabajando.
Patricia explains that growing up in the indigenous movement, her biggest dream was to be a lawyer at ONIC. She traveled all over the country in this role. It was a lot of work because, just like when she was a child, indigenous peoples needed indigenous lawyers to fight for their rights. Together with Ana Manuela Ochoa, also an indigenous lawyer and a guest on this podcast, they sought a solution. They created the Acubadaura Community of Jurists, an organization of indigenous female lawyers to support indigenous peoples and train future lawyers.
Cuando estábamos en esa creación, me acuerdo también vinieron comunicadores indígenas y dijeron, yo no soy abogada, pero también soy como si lo fuera porque me toca defender mi comunidad.
Acubadaura's name comes from the Emberá language. There's no word for lawyer in their language. Instead, an Acubadaura is someone who supports the Haibana, the mediator between the spiritual world and healing practices. They guide and assist people during difficult moments in these ceremonies. And in her role as an Acubadaura, from the most local cases to the national ones, Patricia sees a consistent pattern.
Hay una especie de vergüenza nacional que se avergüenza a los indios allá y nosotros acá. Cuando tienen que ver todo con nosotros, porque mirar la historia indígena o la historia negra nos permite reconocernos y nos permite también reconocer que gran parte de esos territorios en donde están los pueblos indígenas y afros, pues son los territorios del conflicto porque son los territorios olvidados.
Patricia believes there is a national shame, where people think of indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples as separate, with no connection to the rest of society. But understanding their history allows people to recognize that many of the territories where indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities live are the very territories affected by the conflict. Since that photo at the first Indigenous Congress in 1981, Colombia has lived through the armed conflict, a new constitution, a peace agreement, and the challenges of post-conflict. Today, indigenous peoples have more tools than ever, thanks to their history of organization and struggle. Patricia, too, has walked many paths since then, training, holding leadership roles, traveling the country to address her people's needs, and bringing indigenous thought into the heart of the state. She has been one of the first lawyer, the first representative at the national and international level, and the daughter of the first indigenous female deputy.
Por muchos años, las mujeres indígenas hemos luchado y ayudado a crear el movimiento indígena en el mundo, luchando los derechos colectivos. Pero ya es hora y es el momento que el movimiento indígena acompañe a las mujeres indígenas a luchar por sus derechos, porque son muchas, digamos, las transformaciones que tenemos que hacer por las situaciones que están viviendo las mujeres.
Patricia believes that Indigenous women have fought for many years to create the Indigenous movement worldwide. But now, it's time for the Indigenous movement to support women and their rights, since there are many changes that still need to happen to improve their lives and opportunities. That's why for Patricia, being one of the first means carrying a great responsibility towards other women.
Las mujeres indígenas tenemos una tarea muy grande, las lideresas, de ayudar y ser solidarias entre nosotras para ayudar a que las mujeres asuman unos liderazgos muy importantes para sus vidas y para su tejido comunitario. Y me parece que ya hay muchas primeras y eso me da mucha esperanza.
Indigenous women have a great task ahead of them, and as leaders, they must help and support one another to ensure that women take on important leadership roles for their lives and communities. Even so, Patricia is hopeful. There are more Indigenous women becoming the first in their own spheres. For the lawyer, her destiny as a conciliator involves recognizing that the individual path is part of a larger legacy. Supporting the leadership of other women is part of the history of defending her people.
Cambiamos como olas. Entonces, pues esos son tiempos muy pequeños, pero hay que intentar que en este tiempo que nos tocó también podamos contribuir y sí sobrevivir como pueblos todavía.
We change like waves in short moments, but in those moments we must contribute and continue fighting for our people. We change like waves. It is night now in the Sarayaku territory, and the voices of the forest sound different.
No puedo dejar de actuar porque yo creo que los que somos de estos pueblos, que vivimos esto, pues tenemos una obligación con nuestros pueblos ya.
Patricia says, I simply can't walk away from this path. I believe that those who come from these struggles have an obligation to their peoples to continue. As they say in Colombia, we must fight until the sun goes out.
Como se dice en Colombia, por los indígenas, hay que luchar hasta que el sol se apague.
Crossing the River is a podcast from the More Than Human Life program Moth, based at the Center for Human Rights and Global Justice at NYU School of Law and 070 Podcast. Thank you to Patricia Tobón Jagari for sharing your stories and insights with all of us. To look at the photograph we mentioned in the episode, go to mothlife.org. This episode was co-created by Carlos Andrés Vaquero Díaz from Moth, Natalia Arenas, and me, Goldie Levy. The sound design and mix was made by Andrés Villegas. The images of this podcast are made by Nefasta. The music is from Cosmo Sheldrake.
Ibisusa kerame, nepuno rohaba, baito toi home ame, ubisianu mutema. Puchi chuburi buru benana, puchi chuburi buru benana. Maria Tomasa, tu por tu barria, susuhirama, susuhirama. Berabu, biau biau, biau trupanu de pisarro puchua, cucarinubu, ella verara viajar y chuanu futema. Biapatama hurutu tubada. Ichi usa bibirubu, bibirubu.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.